Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This story is narrated in 2 books. Book 2. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a newspaper, magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the actual life of a Muslim family in Sudan. Therefore, all names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Chapter 16. The Serious Crimes of Natasha. The unanticipated arrest of Natasha is a great disaster to her and to her academic fieldwork. The police seized her laptop and searched for it. Through their search, the police found all the data she had collected and stored in her laptop about the abuse of Muslim women. At first, based on those facts, Natasha is accused of apostasy. Then, her charge is developed, and she became accused of serious crimes such as being a spy and agent of the West. She is accused of has been sent by some anti-Islamic group in Canada to Sudan to collect information on the way Muslim women are treated in a Muslim society. In a press conference, the police commissioner of Wad Madani city stated that the female suspect Natasha has been sent by a Zionist feminist group residing in Canada to spy on the social life of the Muslim women. The police have found enough pieces of evidence stored in her laptop which proved without a shadow of a doubt she is spying for an anti-Islamic group. Moreover, the police found information showing that she is a Christian woman, but pretending to be a Muslim woman. Natasha denied those accusations, but admitted that she is a graduate student at McGill University in Canada, and she is working on a PhD, dissertation on women in Islam. She came to Sudan to do fieldwork on her area of specialization so that she could collect data for writing her dissertation. Moreover, she admitted that she converted to Christianity while she was in Canada, but she said she was not a Muslim before her conversion. She was raised as an irreligious person by her atheist late grandfather Dr. Sami Shams al-Din. The police refused to accept her denial of apostasy and held her in custody as a Muslim who apostatized from Islam and became a Christian. The Sudanese police rejected all her justifications and held her on the charges of being a female spy, agent, and apostate woman. The police were able to get information from the Sudanese embassy in Ottawa, which revealed that Natasha mentioned in her application for a tourist visa she wanted to visit her relatives in Sudan. There is no mentioning in her application that she is going to Sudan to do a fieldwork for her PhD, dissertation on Muslim women. The Sudanese embassy stated that, if Natasha had mentioned her real motives for her visit to her relatives, she would not have been given a tourist visa to Sudan. Regarding the other female students, the police referred their cases to the Sharia court. After investigating the matter, the judge of the Sharia court said that the previous repentance of the girls is invalid because they had been done by women. Muslim women in no uncertain terms should not be permitted to judge such serious blasphemies. Even so, the Sharia court agreed to pardon the blasphemous girls if they are ready to recant publicly their doubts and asked for forgiveness in front of religiously qualified Muslim scholars. Following the order of the Islamic court, those girls have been brought to some bearded religious men and made their confessions of their blasphemies and asked for forgiveness. Before their repentances have been accepted, they have been made to recite some verses of the Quran which speak about the status of women in Surah Al-Nisa, Verse 3 and verse 34, and they have to accept them as divine revelation from God Almighty that revealed to his final prophet and messenger Muhammad, and as such are not open to criticism or objection. After that, they are made to utter the 2 Islamic creeds which are known as the Shahada. Then, and only then, their repentances have been officially accepted, and they are allowed to go free. Their repentances have been aired on a popular TV channel, which everyone in the country watches it. As regarding the headmistress and the Islamic female teacher, they are both fired and their licenses to teach are revoked. In addition, they are disqualified from holding any public position because they stepped out of their boundaries as women and did work which supposed to be done by qualified male religious leaders. However, they have been released from prison without receiving any jail term, physical punishment such as scourging, or financial penalties. The Ministry of Religious Affairs exercised pressure on the Ministry of Education and tried to shut down that school, but it failed. The school is reopened after 1-month closure and a new headmistress and an Islamic female teacher are appointed. Unfortunately, half of the school's students have been forbidden by their parents to return to that prestigious school which they considered it has become an accursed establishment of learning. Those families believe that the devil has a strong hold in that girls' school. In the meantime, from the day the Canadian female volunteer teacher arrested by the Wad Madani police, she was tortured and savagely beaten. She was starved purposely for 24 hours and denied even drinking water. She has been tied hands and feet and left bare naked all the time. The police extortionists were able to extract from her confessions which are not true. Whatever they wanted her to say under their cruel torture, they forced her to say it. Then, she was forced to sign those false confessions. They made her to admit in her statement that she is an apostate from Islam, a spy for a Zionist feminist group residing in Canada, and an agent to the West. After making those forced confessions, the police of Wad Madani deleted all her academic collected data and then destroyed her laptop. As soon as the judge of the Sharia court dealt with the charges of the so-called blasphemous female students, the police forwarded Natasha's case to him. Then, she was brought before a group of religious judges. When she appeared before those religious judges, Natasha had no lawyer to defend her because the Sharia court would not allow any advocate to represent any suspect. Therefore, as soon as her charges and her confessions have been read, the Sharia court found her guilty of apostasy from Islam, spying for the Zionist state of Israel, and an agent for the West, and therefore they passed the death penalty on her. She has been sentenced to be executed through either hanging or stoning or beheading. The judge of the Sharia court left the method of her execution for the jail authority to choose which of those 3 ways to execute the apostate Canadian woman. Regarding the father who killed his blasphemous daughter who got dismissed from school, he has been tried by the same Sharia court and acquitted because his action is considered jihad against blasphemy and not an honor killing. The judge of the Sharia court based his decision to free the murderer on the law of the al-wala wal-bara. The al-wala wal-bara means to love for the sake of Allah and to hate for the sake of Allah. The al-wala inspires intimacy, concern, and help. Bara provokes obstruction, enmity, and rejection. Loyalty for the sake of Allah means to love Allah and to come to the assistance of His religion. It is to love those who are obedient to Him and to come to their help. Opposition for the sake of Allah is to feel anger at the enemies of Allah and to struggle against them. According to the judge, the aim of the enemies of Islam, the accursed atheists, Jews, Christians, apostates, Hindus, Buddhists, modernists, Zionists, communists, secularists, feminists, is the destruction of the faith of the Muslims and the erasing of their unique character. Because of this, Allah has called the first group the party of Allah and the second group the party of Satan. The party of Allah are the Muslims and the party of Satan are the aforementioned infidels. Before he acquitted the murderous father, the judge read the following verses of the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad which command the law of the al-wala wal-bara. Let not the believers take disbelievers for their friends in preference to believers. Whoever does this have no connection with Allah unless you are guarding yourselves against them as a precaution. Allah bids you to beware of Himself. And to Allah is the journeying. Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 28. And He says, Say, O Muhammad, to mankind, if you love Allah, follow me. Allah will love you and forgive you your wrong actions. Allah is forgiving, compassionate. Say, obey Allah and the Messenger. And if they turn away, then surely Allah does not love the disbelievers. Surah Al-Imran 3, verses 31 to 32. He also says, They long for you to disbelieve even as they disbelieve, so that you may be the same as them. So do not choose friends from among them until they go out in the way of Allah. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 89. O you who believe, do not take the Jews and the Christians for friends. They are friends of one another, and whoever of you takes them for friends is one of them. Surely Allah does not guide wrongdoing people. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 51. Ibn Shayba reports that the Prophet said, "The strongest bond of faith is love for the sake of Allah and enmity for his sake." Ibn Abbas reports that the Prophet said, "The strongest bond of faith is loyalty for the sake of Allah and opposition for his sake, love for the sake of Allah and enmity for his sake." Again, Ibn Abbas is also reported, the Prophet said, "Whoever loves for the sake of Allah and hates for the sake of Allah, and whoever seals a friendship for his sake, or declares an enmity for his sake, will receive, because of this, the protection of Allah. No one may taste true faith except by this, even if his prayers and fasts are many." Notwithstanding, Natasha's trial and conviction received huge international media coverage. Every newspaper and every TV channel in the West, especially in Canada and the USA, have mentioned her case and her upcoming execution. Her case became internationally known through the Human Rights Watch in Sudan. All human rights groups, women's rights activists, and many Western groups demanded the stopping of the execution of the Canadian girl Natasha and called for her immediate release. The government of Canada also demanded the release of its citizen Natasha Shams-al-Din. The demand of the Canadian government is based on the report of the Toronto Police. The RCMP did a thorough investigation into the life and activities of Natasha while she was living in Calgary and Toronto. All the information showed that Natasha had no connection or affiliation to any feminist group or being sent by any Zionist group. The Department of the Islamic Studies at McGill University confirmed Natasha's claim that she has been registered as a graduate student working towards a PhD degree, and she went to Sudan to do a fieldwork on women in Islam. Natasha's past life is revealed too, and the entire world came to know about the terrible abuses she went through on the hands of her evil biological Muslim father Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din and the Muslim female psychiatrist. The world also came to know that unwittingly she fell in love and married her own brother and had a child with him. Her father fathered a baby with her through rape because he refused to recognize her as his daughter since he fathered her out of adultery. Accordingly, the case of Natasha became a huge concern for every person in the West and East. There are a tremendous number of international pressures on the government of Sudan to stop the Sharia court from beheading Natasha and free her as soon as possible. Due to the international pressures, the government of Sudan revoked the decision of the Islamic court at Wad Madani and transferred her case to a criminal court in Khartoum. The criminal court dropped the charge of apostasy and investigated the charges of spying and connection to a Zionist feminist group in Canada. The criminal court did not find any evidence to indicate that Natasha was sent to Sudan on mission to spy or collaborate with an anti-Islamic group in Canada or anywhere else. Eventually, the Canadian girl has been exonerated of all charges, released from prison, and sent out of Sudan. Natasha spent 6 months in Sudanese jails before she has finally proved to be innocent and set free. During her incarceration in those prisons, she was abused beyond description. She was abused sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally, and religiously. She was raped many times by her male interrogators, guards, and police officers. She was beaten repeatedly by the female inmates and female guards. Those Muslim female inmates hated her when they learned that she was an apostate from Islam and spy to a Zionist feminist group, and she was sent to Sudan to collect data about the abuse of Muslim women, and that when she would return to her country. Some enemies and haters of Muslims use those data to prove that Islam oppresses women and Muslim men abuse their wives and daughters. It is nothing short of a miracle that Natasha could be able remained alive in those death concentration prisons. Notwithstanding, Natasha's imprisonment and condemnation in Sudan made her be an international figure. The Western media wrote extensively about her childhood, upbringing, marriage with her brother, being raped by her own biological father, having a daughter from her brother and a son from her father. Her years of suffering in a mental hospital at Toronto, her torture and abuse in the Sudanese prisons, her trial and receiving a beheading sentence, and her release from the Sudanese jail without being executed. So, The Western media went beyond Natasha's recent incarceration and condemnation and brought to the attention of the outside world the kind of father to whom she was related. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din's multiple marriages, 7 wives, 3 Sudanese wives, and 4 female foreigners, a Pakistani, Egyptian, Eritrean, and Nigerian wife, is kidnapped, raped, imprisonment of his biological daughter Natasha, and fathering a child with her through brutal rape. His crime of child abuse to Brittany Johnson, which sent him to jail for 15 years, his hypocritical spirituality which hastened his release from jail after 8 years, and the many rewards that he received from the Canadian government. His terrorist acts which caused the death of 350 innocent Canadians, including Natasha's grandfather, his escape from Canada and joining the terrorist group of the Somali Shabab, and his failed terrorist plot to murder many Christians on their Christmas party in Calgary. By the way, the media mentioned that the former abused white girl Brittany Johnson has become a Calgary University graduate and at present, she is working in the Department of Social Works in Calgary City and working in the rehabilitation of abused and alcohol and drug addicts among young boys and girls. The media also mentioned how Natasha's mother was sentenced to 200 lashes by a Sudanese Sharia court and how she was cruelly whipped to death for committing adultery with the late Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din and delivering 2 illegitimate children. On her way to Canada, Natasha has been invited by a women's rights activist group in London to come and speak about her many bitter experiences with Islam and her torture and imprisonment in Sudan. Natasha accepted the invitation and disconnected from her trip to Toronto. In one of the most spacious auditoriums in London City, the Canadian girl gave the most controversial speech ever spoken by a woman in human history. Her listeners have been so much touched and moved by her speech. As soon as she left London and headed to Toronto, Natasha's speech spread all over London like fire and turned the city upside down. Muslims have become extremely outraged by her speech. They filled the streets of London and condemned Natasha by name and demanded her prosecution. They accused her of lying and fabricating hadiths of the Prophet. They also said she quoted the verses of the Quran out of context which justified polygamy, child marriage, wife-beating, and other evil practices against women. According to them, Islam has honored the woman and put her in the best social status far better than other religions of the world. Even Muslim women denounced the speech of Natasha. In fact, Natasha said in her speech Islam allows the man to marry 4 wives at the same time, beats his wife, practice female genital mutilation on his small daughters, child marriage. The husband can divorce his wife, but the woman can't divorce her husband. Custody of the children after divorce goes to the father. Women must wear burqas. The woman's brain is half of the man's brain. The son gets a double share of his deceased father's inheritance. The woman's witness cannot be accepted in the court of law because she is a half-man. She is always possessed by demons. She can't be trusted because she has the tendency to cheat on her husband. She is not allowed to be a judge, imama, or khalifa, etc., etc., etc. Chapter 17. Demand for the emancipation of Muslim women. After her controversial speech in the UK, Natasha returned to her country, Canada. At Toronto International Airport, she has been received by some Canadian women's rights activists as a great heroine or a brave female soldier who has returned victoriously from the front lines of the fierce enemies. In an interview with a popular newspaper, Natasha briefly narrated her abuse and suffering when she was falsely accused and unjustly jailed for 6 months in Sudan. However, she does not reveal her incredible findings in the Muslim society about the abuses of Muslim women and decided to keep quiet until she would write her dissertation and obtain her PhD degree. Therefore, as soon as she returned to Canada, Natasha joined the Middle East and Islamic Studies Department at McGill University in Montreal and began to work on her doctorate dissertation on women in Islam. Although all the data she gathered on the abuse and oppression of Muslim women had been deleted and her laptop destroyed by the Wadi Madani police, still she decided to recall from her memory all those evil practices she witnessed happening in front of her eyes too. Muslim females in Sudan. She knows those evils she saw with her own eyes have been registered in her memory and time would never erase them. They are just like someone who had long, horrifying nightmares or watched scary and horror movies. Moreover, she herself had been subjected to brutal physical torture and sexual abuse because she was a female too. She was cruelly raped by 2 Sudanese Muslim police officers inside a darkroom at the isolated highway police checkup point on the day of her arrival in Sudan. She also was brutally raped by many policemen and her male guards in prison on her 6 months detention. She was kept in an isolated cell and remained bare naked most of the time. Besides the daily repeated rapes, the flies tortured her by day and the mosquitoes sucked her blood by night. Their evil intention was to torture her until she would die slow death. Nevertheless, the academic female scholar Natasha is worried that neither her supervisor nor her other assistant professors are going to believe her academic reports when she incorporated her shocking discoveries in her dissertation. She knew and understood that she herself might not believe them if she heard someone else narrating them to her or reading them in a testimonial book or an article in a newspaper or magazine. Shortly after her return to Canada, Natasha pioneered a Muslim female movement which she preferred to call it the Muslim Women's Emancipation Movement. Her new movement is meant to liberate the Muslim females from the slavery of the Muslim males. According to her, it is impossible for Muslim women to rise and revolt against such slavery system because it is justified and legalized by their supposedly divine oracles, which found in their holy Quran and the sacred hadiths of their prophet Muhammad and embodied in the draconian laws, which euphemistically called the Sharia laws. Muslim women could not liberate themselves by themselves. Their liberation has to come from without and be done by non-Muslims. In addition, it must be forced on them. It is just like the slavery system which in the past was sanctioned and permitted by the law and society in the West until great thinkers and freedom fighters stood against it and liberated millions of enslaved black people. Likewise, Muslim women's slavery system is sanctioned and permitted by the Quran and the Sunnah and hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. During the colonization of the Muslim countries, the Western colonizers forced Muslims to abolish slavery, although until today they teach it in their schools and universities. For example, the prestigious Islamic Institute of Learning of Al-Azhar Al-Sharif University in Cairo until the present time teaches the science of slavery, which they called fiqh al-Riq. But when the outside world intervened and abolished slavery worldwide, Muslim countries were forced to denounce it even though their sacred texts allow it forever. The science of slavery is part and parcel of the academic curriculums of all Islamic universities and schools in the Middle East and North Africa. Despite of that fact, today slavery became unlawful practice in almost all Muslim countries. Although slavery is abolished in Muslim countries, still it is secretly practiced in countries like Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Mauritania. Likewise, Natasha believed that evil practices contribute to the abuse and oppression of Muslim women must be internationally outlawed and their ban must be enforced on Muslim countries. Islamic lawful practices such as polygamy, female genital mutilation, inability of the Muslim wife to divorce her husband, wife beating, arranged and forced marriages of girls, female child marriages, wearing of hijabs, niqabs, or burqas, and the like should be treated as forms of female slavery and hence outlaw all over the world. If those misogynistic practices are not outlawed and placed under ban worldwide, Muslim women will not achieve their emancipation from the female slavery which they have been living under its yoke for over 14 centuries. In fact, those evil practices should be first banned in the West, and those who practice them should be jailed. The law in the USA criminalizes all kinds of misogynistic practices of Islam, such as polygamy, female genital mutilation, wife beating, female child marriage, etc. But many Muslim men defy the law and practice those evils against their female children and other female counterparts. Muslim women cannot protest those practices because by doing so they go against their sacred scriptures, the Quran and hadiths. Many of them believe their Islamic Sharia law permits those practices. In other words, all Muslim women know and believe that their holy Quran and the authentic hadiths of their prophet sanction and encourage those practices. Therefore, many of Muslim women live in a state of ambivalence and self-deception. They love what they hate and abhor what they hold sacred and divine. And as such, none of them can free her from such a vicious cycle. She has either to quit her faith or get outside assistance. This is the dilemma that most Muslim women find themselves being caught up between its two horns. To solve such a dilemma, Muslims should openly be told in the media and through public gatherings that some practices in their religion are criminal acts and hence they should abandon them. Those Islamic organizations or intellectual individuals who still believe in the legality of those misogynistic practices and try to defend them should be criminalized and condemned. Other evil Islamic practices which are lawful in the Sharia, such as jihad against infidels for the sake of spreading Islam and the law of apostasy which justifies the killing of those who leave Islam, should both be criminalized, and those who believe in them should be punished by the mighty hand of the law. Finally, this leads us to conclude that Islam as a religion should be criminalized and banned. Natasha knows such a demand is not likely to be accepted and approved by any Western country. Therefore, she decided to focus on the emancipation of Muslim women from those evil misogynistic practices which oppress and abuse them. As soon as Natasha's new movement gained substantial publicity, many Muslims opposed it. Muslim feminists strongly condemned it and demanded that its female founder should be prosecuted. Natasha has not been surprised when she came to know that Muslim women in the West, especially the feminists, condemned her movement and accused her of being a fanatic bigot and a racist. Some feminists accused her of trying to gain name and fame by being called Muslim women's liberator. While some Muslim female professors in some American universities argued that Natasha is a psychologically disturbed woman and hence her movement should not be taken seriously. They contended that she is trying to soothe the terrible feeling of guilt for marrying her own brother and having a child with him and for being raped by her own father who likewise fathered a child with her. Therefore, those intellectual feminists accused her of suffering from Oedipus complex. For those who are not in the know, Oedipus refers to a 5th century BC Greek mythological character, Oedipus, who unwittingly killed his father, Laius, and married his mother, Jocasta. Natasha ignored all those negative criticisms and decided to make her main target the liberation of Muslim females who are living in the Muslim countries. She knew and understood that many Muslim women who are living in Western countries to some extent are protected from those abuses through the Western laws and values. But she is also aware that there are always evil ways which Muslim men follow and oppress and abuse their females without being caught and punished by the Western law. It took Natasha 1 year to write her PhD dissertation. It is 300 pages. It focused on women in Islam. She divided it into 6 chapters. The first chapter is the introduction. The second chapter focused on the misogynistic message of Islam. The third chapter narrated her personal experience with Islam and the effects of Islam on her family members. The fourth section related the many evil practices that she witnessed happening in front of her to Muslim women in Sudan. The fifth section dealt with the false claims of Muslim feminists, reformists, and modernists, and the sixth chapter is the conclusion. The final chapter is the most important of all 6 chapters because it showed the originality of her academic work. No postgraduate student had ever before made such a great discovery and contribution as she has been done in her PhD dissertation. After a few months, Natasha's dissertation was accepted by the external examiners, and she has successfully defended it. As soon as she received her PhD degree, Natasha published it as a book. Her book, or rather her dissertation on women in Islam, is received with huge objection by the Muslim feminists. Some Muslim female professors in Canada as well as in the USA blamed the Department of the Middle East and Islamic Studies at the University of McGill for accepting such false presentation of Natasha of the status of women in Islam and her rejection of the so-called egalitarian teachings of the Holy Quran. The feminists directed their critiques against the entire dissertation and focused on the 5th chapter which dealt with their false claims. Chapter 18. Controversy about the status of women in Islam. To do justice to Natasha as well as the Muslim feminists, let us summarize the 5th chapter of her doctorate dissertation. In this chapter, Dr. Natasha dealt with the claim of Muslim feminists, which stated that Islam treats equally the man and the woman. Many Muslim feminists today are critically studying and rewriting the issue of male versus female gender in Islam. Most of them admit that Muslim women are marginalized in the Islamic societies. But they argue that it is not the true teaching of the Holy Quran, but the tradition, which put women in a lower status than men. In order to uplift women and give them equal rights as men, Muslim feminists argue that the misogynistic hadiths, sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, must be disregarded. They believe that these misogynistic hadiths were the creation of a later generation of Muslim leaders and scholars and hence do not represent the true message of the Quran, which gives equal rights to men and women. However, many prominent Muslim scholars reject the feminists' views. The fundamentalists argue that the hadiths are authentic sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and rejecting them means denying the words of the infallible Prophet of Islam. They believe that it is not possible to understand the Quran without the hadiths, for the latter explain the former. Accordingly, in the contemporary Muslim world, the hadiths, the life, sayings, and deeds of the Prophet Muhammad, became a matter of disputation among scholars. In one camp, the feminists, reformists, and modernists call for a distinction between the misogynistic message of Islam, which contradicts the true spirit of the religion, and the egalitarian message of the Quran, which represents Islam in its purest form. In the other camp, we find the fundamentalists, traditionalists, and conservatives who accept all the traditions of Islam, which are in turn incorporated in the Sharia law. Though in a few cases, members of this second group are prepared to distinguish between authentic and non-authentic traditions, the disputations between these two camps have not yet been settled, and due to outside influences, the gulf between the two is becoming wider day after day. That said, these academic and scholarly issues have not affected the life of the average Muslim woman. Most Muslims today accept the teachings of Islam, which have been passed down from generation to generation and preserved in the Sharia law, which in turn draws its authority and validity from the Quran and the Hadiths. In her dissertation, Dr. Natasha argued that she would like to examine critically the views of Muslim feminists and see whether their claims can be established despite the long tradition of Islam in which the Sharia law, which is based on the Quran and the Hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, became the governing norms and laws of Muslims. Muslim scholars agree upon the authenticity of two collections of the Hadiths, namely, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Other collections, such as Muwatta Malik, Sunan Abu Dawud, Sunan Ibn Majah, and Al-Tirmizi have also been accepted and used in the formation of the Sharia. In general, the Hadiths collections are works that record in minute detail what the Prophet of Islam said and did. They constitute, along with the Quran, the book revealed by Allah, both the source of law and the standard for distinguishing the true from the false, the permitted from the forbidden. They have shaped Muslim ethics and values, citing Mir-Nisai 1993, page 1. For many Muslims, the authenticated Hadith is sacred literature, only second in holiness to the Quran, quoting an article by Stroesser 1992, page 1. In comparing the authority of the former to the latter, the authentic Hadith is believed to be nothing short of revelation, for the Quran says of Muhammad, he does not speak out of low desires. It is not but inspiration inspired, Surah Al-Najm 53, verses 3-4. The only difference between the Quran and the Hadith is that whereas the former was revealed directly through the angel Gabriel with the very letters that are embodied by Allah, the latter was revealed without letters and words. Citing Hack and Newton 1996, page 1. The Quran strongly endorses the authenticity of the Hadiths and leaves Muslim men and women with no preference between the two. Whenever Allah and the Apostle have decided a matter, it is not for a faithful man or woman to follow a course of their own choice. Surah Al-Ahzab 33, verse 36. Despite this strong belief in the Hadiths, today we find that some Muslim scholars, especially the feminists and the reformists, do not hesitate to question the authenticity of the Hadith. They accept the important place that the Hadith occupies in Islam, but they want to distinguish between the authentic and non-authentic tradition of the Prophet. They use the Quran as a measuring rod. Any Hadith that contradicts the egalitarian spirit of the Quran should be rejected. This argument assumes that the Quran does not include a misogynistic message within its pages. One of these is the female Professor Rifat Hassan, who states, "It is a clear teaching of the Quran that men and women are equal in the sight of God." Hassan 2001, page 63. That said, the egalitarian message of the Quran is a controversial issue as well. A few Muslim feminists see contradictions in the Quran, and they support their views by referring to its teachings of men's superiority, polygamy, divorce, and wife-beating. See Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34, Surah 4, verse 3. Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 228, Surah 2, verse 282, and Surah Al-An'am 6, verse 10. The Egyptian feminist Nawal El-Saadawi is one of those feminists who see contradictions in the Quran. She notes that God says in his book that he created men and women from the same soul, and then in another page says the opposite, that men are superior to women. Saadawi 2001, page 4. Thus, the egalitarian message of the Quran is not a settled issue. Those who preach such a message must travel a long way before they can win even one convert. For their quest to formulate Quranic-based agendas for a renewed Islamic order, the general Muslims' reaction to the questioning of the hadith's authenticity remains strongly negative. Stroesser 1992, page 1. Sample of the misogynistic hadiths. Allah's apostle once said to a group of women, "I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man can be led astray by some of you." The women asked, "O Allah's apostle, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion?" He said, "Is not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man?" They replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency of your intelligence. Isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her menses?" The women replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency in your religion." Sahih Bukhari, hadith number 301. The authenticity of the above hadith is beyond dispute. It is mentioned repeatedly in the most authentic two collections of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. When al-Bukhari and Muslim both accept a hadith, it is called Mutafagan alayhi, which means agreed upon. Muslim scholars consider this the highest degree of authenticity. Hack and Newton 1996, page 3. The Arabic phrase al-nisa najisatin aglayanwadan, women are deficient in intelligence and religion, is on the tip of every Muslim's tongue. This statement is used by scholars as well as lay people to define women. There's a famous proverb in the Arab countries which says, "If a woman becomes an axe, she will not cut a head of anyone." This proverb does not only mean that the woman is weak, but she is utterly useless. To turn to further examples. The woman is like a rib. If you try to straighten her, she will break. So, if you want to get benefit from her, do so while she still has some crookedness. Sahih Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 113. Women are ungrateful to their husbands and are not grateful for the favors and the charitable deeds done to them. If you have always been benevolent to one of them and then she sees something in you, not of her liking, she will say, "I have never received any good from you." Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 1, Hadith number 28. When a woman comes, she comes in the form of a devil. Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 3240. The Prophet Muhammad said, "I have not left any calamity or fitna after me more detrimental to men than women." Al-Bukhari and Muslim agreed upon this hadith. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 33. He also said, "O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you, women." Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 1, Hadith number 301. The Prophet said, "Amongst the inmates of paradise, the women will form the minority." Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 6600. The Prophet Muhammad also said, "Those who entrust their affairs to a woman will never know prosperity," citing Murnisi 1993, page 49. Based on this hadith, The Sharia does not permit a Muslim woman to assume any leadership position such as a president, judge, lawyer, boss, imama, caliph, etc. Fatima Mernisai notes that some hadiths, prophetic tradition, originated from Kitab al-Bukhari, which are told by the teachers hurt me. They state that the Prophet said, "Dog, donkey, and woman would annul anyone's prayer whenever they pass ahead them, break off between the praying man and Qibla." I was shocked to hear that sort of hadith and never repeat it with the hopes that silence would wipe away this hadith out of my mind. I asked, how come the Prophet said that sort of hadith which hurt me so much? How could the beloved Muhammad hurt a little girl who is in her growth, attempt to make him as pillars of her romantic dreams? Mernisai 1991, page 82. Muslim women and the tradition. Perhaps the most accurate accounts in which Muslim women have been placed by the Islamic heritage can be found in the writings of the Egyptian Muslim liberal thinker, Sa'id Mahmud al-Kimni. In his book, Rab al-Zaman, The Lord of This Time, under an article entitled, Women in Religious Heritage and Legends, which he delivered as a lecture to the People's Progressive Women's Union, al-Kimni held the Islamic heritage responsible for degrading Muslim women. Al-Kimni 96, page 219. According to him, the religious heritage made the woman to believe she has been created from a bent rib, deficient in religion and intellect. Her testimony equals half of a man's. Her inheritance is half of a man's. She cannot divorce. Page 220. The Muslim woman believes herself to be a Satan and therefore she cannot control her sexual desires. Page 221. According to the Islamic heritage, woman succumbs to her lust and not intellect. She has a natural tendency to cheat on her husband because she was one of the four that could not be trusted: money, sultan, time, and woman. Page 220. Woman had been created for the comfort and enjoyment of her husband. In that way, the religious heritage made the Muslim woman to believe herself to be a mere vagina, and hence she became horma, taboo, and haram, forbidden. Page 221. If she kept her faith and her vagina and gave enjoyment to her husband and master, she would enter heaven. Page 220. Woman's faith could not be perfect except by her complete obedience and submission to her husband, and such obedience would secure to her a place in heaven as a prostitute among the many harem of the man. Page 221. This gloomy picture that al-Kimni depicted for the Muslim woman irritated many Muslim female professors and ulama or scholars of Al-Azhar al-Sharif University who believed that Islam had honored the woman and put her in the best place. Al-Kimni states that the Quran gives two contradictory rights for women. Al-Kimni 2004, page 170. While some verses make woman equals to man, such as in Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 195, Surah Al-Nahl 16, verse 97, Surah Al-Tawbah 9, verse 71, Surah Al-Ahzab 33, verse 35, and Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 38. This positive attitude towards woman has been distorted by Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34, which allows the man to beat his rebellious wife or disobedient daughter. In a hadith mentioned by Al-Bukhari, the Prophet said, "Any people make woman their leader will not prosper." Page 170. Al-Kimni quotes many verses and hadiths to show that woman has been placed in a low position by Islam. In this regard, Al-Kimni refers to an incident in which he was condemned as a kafir or unbeliever by the female professors and doctors of Al-Azhar University because he exposed in his book Al-Fashun and Al-Watan, Fascists and the Nation, the low status in which Islam put the woman, that she was inferior to man in every respect and made for his sexual pleasure. The main reason for their protest was that Al-Kimni makes mistake by demanding rights for women, which Islam gave to men only. Page 177. The samples of the misogynistic hadiths and the accounts of Al-Kimni give an insight into the theory of women in Islam. It is evident that women are understood as causing constant threats to the social order and the religion, and as such they need to be brought under control. Quoting the words of Darlene M. Jushka, if women are understood to carry the darker elements of culture, the chaotic, the sexual, the irrational, then the suppression of these perceived threats is necessary. Jushka 2001. Page 161. Men's superiority over women in Islam. The Quran states that men and women are equal regarding their religious obligations, rewards and punishment, and oneness of their creation. See Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 195, Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 1. However, in other verses the Quran teaches that men are superior and 1 degree above the women. See Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3 and verse 34, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 228. The Algerian Fidelum Rabbit, commenting on the Quran verse Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34 says, "What is really being communicated through this verse is that God prefers man over woman because the latter are inferior to the former." Citing Smith 1978, page 526. According to Islam, men are superior to women in knowledge, power, authority, and that is because God prefers the former to the latter and men spend out of their means on women. Therefore, women are thought to be deficient in intelligence and religion. The Algerian Fidelum Rabbit concluded that those scholars who want to liberate Muslim women are indirectly asking them to stop believing in their holy scriptures, the Quran and Hadiths, because those sacred texts make women inferior to men. Women are deficient in gratitude and as witness. The Quran states, "And call into witness 2 witnesses, men, or if the 2 be not men, then 1 man and 2 women, such witness as you approve of, that if 1 woman errs the other will remind her." Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 282. There is no definition so widely used and accepted among Muslims for defining the woman than she is awara. The term awara is defined in Encyclopedia of Islam as the external genitals, especially of the female, Hack and Newton 1996, page 5. The word is derived from the noun nakedness. So, to put it in a simple meaning, the entire body of the woman is nakedness or a pussy. In another hadith, Al-Tirmizi reported that woman is awara. The woman is awara. When she goes outside of her house, the devil welcomes her. Al-Tirmizi, Volume 2, page 65. This hadith says that the woman is always possessed by demons. So, she is dangerous to the Islamic society and hence she is supposed to be imprisoned inside her house. The above 2 hadiths are pertaining to the woman's covering. There is disagreement between the founders of the 4 schools of the Sharia. While Maliki and Hanbali schools allow the hands and the face to remain uncovered, the Hanafi and Shafi considered them to be awara and hence demand the woman to be completely veiled from head to feet. Hack and Newton 1996, page 5. Some Islamic group like supporters of the Prophet's Sunnah considered even the woman's voice is awara and therefore would not permit her to speak anywhere. Woman is a crooked rib. Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim agreed upon the following hadith. The woman is like a rib. If you try to straighten her, she will break. So, if you want to get benefit from her, do so while she still has some crookedness. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 113. In Kitab Adab al-Naika, Al-Tirmizi states, 3 persons, if you esteem them, they will dishonor you, and if you dishonor them, they will esteem you. The woman, the servant, and the Nabatiyah, Al-Tirmizi, Hadith in page 51. Men's rights on women. Islam has ascribed some rights which men have on their women. The most important of these rights is total obedience and submission of the women to their husbands. Wife's obedience to her husband and father. Many hadiths are reported which comment on Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34. By the way, the Arabic word Al-Nisa means in English the women. Therefore, this surah is full of misogynistic teachings against women. The Prophet Muhammad said, "There are 3 persons whose prayer will not be accepted, nor their virtues be taken above: the runaway slave until he returns back to his master, the woman with whom her husband is dissatisfied, and the drunkard until he becomes sober." Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Book 1, Hadith number 74. He also said, "Whosoever a woman dies while her husband is pleased with her, she will enter paradise." Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Book 1, Hadith number 60. The Prophet of Allah said, "When a man calls his wife to satisfy his desire, let her come to him though she is occupied at the oven." Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Book 1, Hadith number 61. The Prophet also said, "By the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, no woman can fulfill her duty towards Allah until she fulfills her duty towards her husband. If he asks her for intimacy, even if she is on her camel's saddle, she should not refuse." Sunan Ibn Majah, Book 9, Hadith number 1926. In this regards, a prominent Malaysian Islamic scholar, Perak Mufti Tan Sri Harsani Zakaria said, "Even the Prophet says, even when they're riding on the back of the camel, when the husband asks her, she must give." He exclaimed, "So there's no such thing as rape in marriage. This is made by European people. Why should we follow?" In other words, the Muslim husband is allowed to rape his wife if she refused to sleep with him. The Messenger of Allah said, "Whenever a man calls his wife to his bed and she refused to come to him, and then he passes the night in an angry mood, the angels curse her till she gets up at dawn." Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 121. The above hadith is agreed upon. Sahih Muslim reported the same hadith, but with slight difference. When a man calls his wife to his bed, and she refuses, the one who is in the sky will be angry with her until her husband is pleased with her. Hack and Newton 1996, page 7. He also said, "Had I ordered anybody to prostrate before anyone, I would have ordered women to prostrate before their husbands on account of men's rights over the women ordained by Allah." Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Hadith number 70. Reported by Abu Dawud, Ahmad, Al-Tirmizi, Ibn Majah, and Ibn Hibban. Wife's beating. The Quran states, "Righteous women are therefore obedient. And those you fear may be rebellious, nushuz, admonish them, banish them to their couches, and then you must beat them." Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34. The above verse has become very controversial among modern scholars. Feminists, reformists, and liberal Muslims argue that this verse does not imply that the husband can beat his wife if she becomes rebellious. They try to find different meanings to the Arabic word adrebahan and refer the suitable one to the interpretation of the verse. An example for these efforts can be seen in Asma Parl's book, The Believing Women in Islam. However, these efforts have become difficult to accept when we refer the verse to the occasion of its revelation. The above verse was revealed in connection with a woman who complained to the Prophet Muhammad that her husband slapped her on the face, which was still marked by the slap. At first the Prophet said to her, "Get even with him," but then added, "Wait until I think about it." Later, the above verse was revealed, after which the Prophet said, "We wanted one thing, but Allah wanted another, and what Allah wanted is best," citing Hack and Newton 1996. Page 9. Beating the wife is allowed by the Sharia in 4 cases. Although the Quran allows the wife's beating for her disobedience, some Muslim scholars mentioned 4 reasons. 1. If she does not wear fineries though her husband asked her to do so. 2. When she is called for sexual intercourse and she refuses without any lawful excuse. 3. When she is ordered to take a bath to clean herself from her impurity for performing her prayer and she refused. 4. When she goes out of her house without permission of her husband. In Sahih Muslim, Aisha narrated a hadith in which she admitted that the Prophet struck her on her chest until it caused pain. "He struck me on the chest which caused me pain, and then said, 'Did you think that Allah and his apostle would deal unjustly?'" Sahih Muslim, Book 4, Hadith number 2127. The hadiths, which speak about women, are countless in number. A few of them show favor to women. Those few hadiths, which speak well about women, are referring to her as a mother and not as a wife or daughter. Abu Hurairah reported that a man came to the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, and asked, "O Messenger of Allah, Who is the person who has the greatest right on me with regards to kindness and attention? He replied, Your mother. Then who? He replied, Your mother. Then who? He replied, Your mother. Then who? He replied, Your father. Another hadith said, Paradise is under the feet of mothers. Dr. Suaib Hassan commenting on this second hadith said, The above hadith with this wording is da'if, unauthentic, but its meaning is contained in the hadith of Ibn Majah and al-Nasai that a man came to the Prophet, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, and said, O Messenger of Allah, I intend to go in jihad on a military expedition, but I have come to ask your advice. He said, Is your mother alive? He said, Yes. He said, Then stay with her, for the garden is under her feet. Hack and Newton 1996, page 12. Feminists, reformists, and liberal Muslims very often quote the above two hadiths to support their views that Islam is an egalitarian religion and that the misogynistic hadiths were the invention of latter generations. However, these two hadiths advise sons to be kind to their mothers, but neither the husbands to their wives nor fathers to their daughters. However, these two hadiths are not accepted as authentic hadiths because neither Sahih al-Bukhari nor Sahih Muslim included them in their collections. Only Ibn Majah and al-Nasai mention them. These two collections are hardly quoted by Muslim scholars. Having the above-mentioned verses and hadiths in the main sacred books of Islam, the Quran and hadiths, still some female Muslim scholars claim that religion is favoring women and giving them equal rights with men. It is hard to believe such a claim. Dr. Natasha concludes, to accept the egalitarian message of Islam and to deny its misogynistic teachings, for me is only wishful thinking. Such efforts will not benefit those for whom the efforts are made. Muslim women who live in the West are not liberated because of these efforts, but the societies in which they live granted them equality with their men. Muslim women who live in Muslim societies are still live under the yoke of bondage of the so-called infallible prophet of God Muhammad, who incorporated and perpetuated for eternity in his thousands of hadiths and verses of the Quran which teach those misogynistic teachings about women. Those evil anti-feminist teachings are fixed and rigid, and as such, they are not open for criticism or reformation. Any Muslim thinker who tried to criticize or reform them had been accused as an apostate and put to death. If those Muslim feminists go to any Muslim country and oppose the teachings of the hadiths, they will be accused as female apostates and put to death. Therefore, according to Dr. Natasha, the emancipation of Muslim women should be done by outsider thinkers, and such female liberation must be implemented and forced on all Muslim societies wherever they are living on the planet Earth. After all, freedom and equality are not an option, but rights to all human beings, males as well as females.